I want to talk today about the left-wing narrative that conservatives and Trump supporters are Nazis. This is something that we hear all the time in the corporate liberal media. They accuse deplorables, people in MAGA hats, people who go to Trump rallies of somehow being Nazis, mostly because they support the Second Amendment here in the United States. So today we're going to talk about who the real Nazis are and who the real Nazi sympathizers are. This here is a photo of Fred Koch with Adolf Hitler. Fred Koch is the father of the Koch brothers, Charles and David, who fund libertarian and progressive on immigration organizations all over the world. They are pushing for a one-world government. They are pushing for rule by the corporate globalist elites like themselves. And they have hired an entire army of recent college graduates in Washington, D.C. to push for their globalist agenda. They're no different than Walmart. They're no different than Amazon, which is now a major government contractor. And the horrible thing about the Kochs is they bought up the Tea Party. The Tea Party was a real thing at one time, and it still is. And it's always operated underground. However, as far as the media is concerned, the Koch brothers bought it up because they created all these groups like Americans for Prosperity and these other stupid things in Washington, D.C., and hired a bunch of college kids to do, tweets and stuff like that about libertarianism. And all they care about in libertarianism is smoking weed and, legalizing prostitution. But on immigration and open borders and losing American sovereignty and globalist control of the world, they're all about that. So here are the Kochs with Adolf Hitler. And in fact, Fred Koch built oil refineries for Adolf Hitler. And Jane Meyer of The New Yorker, actually reported that a big part of the Nazi war machine starting out in the 1930s was revenue that was generated by these oil refineries that Fred Koch built for Adolf Hitler. Now let's go on to Prescott Bush. So already we have a globalist Republican meeting with Hitler, and here's Prescott Bush. This is the father of a man who became president of the United States, George H.W. Bush. And here he is shaking hands with Adolf Hitler. Prescott Bush's assets, if you don't know this, were seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Because even after Pearl Harbor, Prescott Bush was heavily invested in Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime through the Union Banking Corporation and through a firm called Brown Brothers Harriman. So in 1942, Prescott Bush's assets were seized literally for treason, for conspiring or colluding, shall we say, with Adolf Hitler. It is a well-documented fact that IBM provided census technology to the Nazis so that they could more easily round up Jews to put into the gas chambers during the Holocaust. That's what that technology was used for, created by IBM. It was census data to keep track on people and to keep track of Jews specifically so that young Jewish Council Nazi members like George Soros could keep track on their fellow Jews and help to cart them off into the concentration camps. Let's go on to Queen Elizabeth. This is the British crown right here. This is a young Queen Elizabeth. This is the monarch and the head of state of England. And here she is giving a Nazi salute. Now, she blames it on her Uncle Edward, who was a Nazi, big friend of Hitler. And she said, she was tricked into doing this by her uncle. I don't think that that looks like a trick. I think that looks like something that the British royal family wanted intentionally to create that image, knowing full well that she was going to be the future queen. So, let's talk about what's really going on here. Why is it that the Kochs get a free pass for the fact that their empire was built largely by their relationship with Adolf Hitler before World War II? Why does the Bush family get a pass when we saw Prescott Bush shaking hands with Hitler, a man who killed 6 million Jews? And it wasn't that long ago that his grandson was president of the United States. Why does IBM get a pass after they directly contributed to the death of so many people? After World War II, when the United Nations came into power, and ever since then, there has been this idea that nationalism must always be associated with the Nazis. That if you believe in the sovereignty of your own country and protecting your borders and protecting your right to exist as a nation and not just a meaningless cog in the globalist superstate, then somehow you are a Nazi. But these very same people, these very same globalists in power, were the ones who enabled Adolf Hitler to commit his reign of terror in Europe. They were the very people who financially supported him. And why did Franklin Delano Roosevelt look the other way for so long while Europe came under attack, forcing the great Winston Churchill to go it alone with his men at the rescue mission in Dunkirk and to survive the raids, the bombing raids on London as FDR sat by? Why is it that the media calls American patriots, many of whom are the sons and grandsons of people who fought against Hitler in World War II? And let's take off that photo so that YouTube can't flag this video, because we're not doing anything wrong. We are calling out mainstream media lies and mainstream media false narrative. Okay. And I want to talk about globalism right now. I want to talk about the Tower of Babel. And I want to talk about what the globalist agenda is really all about, because it goes back to Babylon. It goes back to the idea that God and the sacred order is not correct, and therefore the spiritual rebels and the Satanists and the pagans can govern themselves without God. And the first time they tried this was with the Tower of Babel, which was the center of government, the center of commerce. The entire world had one world language. Okay? This is what they want to bring back. And when God saw this the first time around, and this is what the scripture says, "So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth." God is a nationalist. God does not want a one-world government. God does not want the big tech companies, the transnational unions, the corporations like Walmart that disenfranchise the people and their workers and suck the life out of our local economies. They don't want foreign military interests desecrating American liberty here on this blessed soil. America is a nation worth fighting for, because America has always been a nation independent of the tyranny of the rest of the world. If America's borders are erased, as the Koch brothers and the Bushes desire, then our people here in the United States will be subject to a global tyranny the likes of which we have very little chance of defeating. Only by defending America and protecting our borders are we going to allow ourselves to remain free. Please keep reading BigLeaguePolitics.com, and thank you so much for listening.